My name is Marcia Say. I am a customer education specialist here at Responsive. I've been with the company for about 3 years now. I was previously a customer success manager, so I got to work really hands-on with all of our amazing customers. In my past life, moved over to our academy team where we focus on building educational content for our customers, whether that is with, self-guided courses or with what Helene really specializes in and is so amazing at our webinars. But Helene, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Marcia. Hey, everyone. I'm Helene Holiday. As we mentioned at the top, I'm a learning education specialist on the Responsive Academy team. I've been with Responsive as of next week, 4 years, which is crazy because to be honest, when I first started, I had no idea what an RFP was, what a proposal was, and now I consider myself quite an expert because I got to work with so many amazing proposal specialists like you on the call today as a customer success manager prior to this role now. On the Academy team, I curate educational content with Marcia, and I specialize in our live training series. We do webinars at Responsive that are specific for new users. We do monthly product updates because our product always has exciting enhancements. And my personal favorite is something called Coffee Chats. That's a lot like today's session. We dive into topics that matter most to proposal managers and try to give you some tips to make your life a little easier and help you learn how to use the CRM tools to the best. I'm really excited to talk about AI. It's ever evolving and changing the way that we work. So solid knowledge management is really going to help you not only keep up, but really thrive in this changing environment.
Thanks, Helene. All right, so to kick things off, let's discuss why are we even here? So the efficiency of your AI tool is going to be highly dependent on how organized and maintained your content library is. As GenAI has re-entered the chat for a lot of our customers, we've been revisiting the conversation of what is the most impactful way to add content into my library. And the first instinct for, I'd say about 98% of our customers is to go ahead and dump everything in there at once, and then AI will just figure it out. We call this the Google effect, which basically means I'm sure we've all gone into Google, asked it a question, and then it does this really nice thing now where it's like, hey, we're using AI to give you an answer to it immediately. And I'm sure I don't want to speak on behalf of all of you, but you've looked at some of those responses and have gone, yeah, that's not right and hasn't been right for a while. That's because when Google is doing that search and creating that AI search for you, it's looking through the expansive internet to apply a response that it thinks is going to work best for you. It's not necessarily saying, oh, yikes, this might not be an accurate source, or this is kind of old. It's just giving you what it has. So the same rules are going to apply for an SRM platform, whether it's responsive or not, using AI. It's looking in whatever content you're feeding it to serve you up a new response. In Responsive specifically, our AI tools are very much just looking at your secure content library database that you've created. Unless you're using our nifty Ask tool, which we have a little picture of right here. It's our little chat bot that we have. You can give it up to 5 domains and subdomains to search for answers within, but still, it's very secure. We keep it as locked in as possible so we're not risking sending out any inaccurate information. But we go back to that principle of if you have a ton of content in your content library that's maybe not vetted or it's outdated, then it's not going to produce the best results for you. And it does cite sources, right? So I can click on the response and go, where the heck did this come from? And see directly which document it came from or which question and answer pair it came from. But that's still taking up my time. And the point of AI is to be your partner, right? You want AI to be there to make your life easier, not taking your job. You still need to verify that it's accurate, but it also shouldn't be making your job harder, right? So the whole idea of mining for gold is that instead of, mining for gold in a minefield and, having to scrub off a bunch of dirt, we are mining for gold in a treasure chest, and maybe some diamond dust got sprinkled on it and we have to zhuzh it up a little bit, but we're really only looking in the best possible content to give us what we need, which is what Response has been doing with AI for the past 10 years. We've just added some new nifty Gen AI products in there, but the same rule applies. Now, you may be saying, that's all well and good. Love a clean content, but I don't even know where to begin. So that's where we're getting into things today. But first, before we can talk about those steps, we need to really discuss who should be involved in that process. First and foremost, you have to have a leader running the whole content management process, and that's going to be your SRM or knowledge management platform admin or internal SME. At Responsive, we call this a super admin. We don't give out capes, even though we should, but this is the person who's going to be the expert on whatever platform is being used or software is being used. Or if you're not even using a software, you know how the proposal process works. You know exactly how content is getting vetted, how it's being used, and where to use it. This person's going to be responsible for making sure that the content is always operating well. And in a content cleanup process specifically, they're going to be leading the charge and seeing it through fruition. Sometimes this is only going to be one person. I've definitely worked with those heroes in the past, and that's okay. If you're the one person leading the charge, then maybe there's some extra work involved that you'll need to do, but we do need to have that one person there responsible for the whole project. Next, we'll move on to that core admin team or end user leadership. This is going to be the folks who have boots on the ground. They are using the content or their team is using the content, so they really know what's important, what's needing to be used, and how to access it, how their team is trying to access it, maybe what some pain points are. So their advice throughout the entire process is going to be helpful. If you can get them to help you out also during the cleanup process, that's nice too. But then there's the other flip side of it with that end user leadership of, they'll be responsible for making sure that the end users are then following suit, doing what they need to do to effectively use that content management. You can go through a whole content management cleanup with your team, and it can look really great and your AI can be running well. But if no one's using it, what's the point, right? So you need that leadership buy-in so they can then tell their teams to operate as needed. And you can think of it this way as well. If I were to, start ringing bells at my company and say, hey guys, start doing this, they'd all be like, we love you, Marcia. That's great. You're not my boss. Totally fair. So having that leadership buy-in is super important to make sure that things are running well. The final group here is going to be your content owners and SMEs. So these are going to be the actual experts who know the content better than anything, that can come in and make sure that what's in there is still accurate, it's good to go, it's vetted. This is going to be your security teams. It's going to be maybe your legal teams, or even we love our marketing teams. Is this branded correctly? Is the security information correct? Is this legally okay to send? You're maybe not going to be the expert on that, so we need to have their voice in there as well. They'll be helpful in a content cleanup process to make sure that what is there is accurate. But then even beyond a content cleanup, we'll need them to come in pretty regularly to make sure that things haven't changed. Once we have all of that established, we can move on to the 5 steps to success, and I'll have Helene kick us off there.
Yeah, so we are going to outline Marcia and my 5 steps to success that we've identified through working with our clients on knowledge management, specifically for AI. So these are going to include understanding your library, identifying outdated content, cleaning it up, organizing what remains, and setting up for long-term success. So hopefully it's a shorter cycle in the future. We'll dive deeper into each one of these steps on the following slides, but for now, just think of these as foundations for optimizing your content library to work really seamlessly with AI. All right, so step 1 is understanding your library. I really relate to this because I always just want to jump into anything and just start doing it right away. But understanding your library first is really critical, especially in this AI era. Why is that? Because if your library isn't aligned with the way AI works for the tool that you're using or the ever-evolving needs of this industry, you'll miss risking out of the potential that both automation and efficiency can bring. As we all know, the landscape of the proposal industry and every industry is constantly changing. There's new procurement acts, there's evolving regulations, internal reorgs, other shifts. So it's really important to understand how your current content is being used today so you can plan better for tomorrow. By assigning overall content library usage, you can answer questions like what your team is actually even searching for when utilizing the library. You can understand how the library is being applied in outgoing projects, if at all. Is everyone just manually answering questions and not taking advantage of AI tools or the library? Does the content reflect your brand voice, as Marcia mentioned, or current industry standards? And maybe the most important question is, what feedback have you received from your team about the content quality? Even though we're in this AI era, your team matters, and having their buy-in is going to be really important moving forward. This understanding is going to be super essential because the quality and structure of your library is going to directly impact how AI can support your workflows. For example, as I mentioned, if you have high manual entry rates, that means your AI isn't being leveraged to its full potential. And it's not going to be able to find or retrieve the correct content due to that poor structure or outdated information. So it's not doing your job, and it's not going to help you at all. It's just going to be another thing that you haven't taken advantage of, which I think we can all relate to. Truly, like, given how quickly the industry changes, you'll want to keep your library in a state where AI can easily adapt, and understanding that is going to be the first tool to that. Now, I have a couple reports that can help you illustrate your library content at the beginning, as I mentioned, to help you understand. These are going to be illustrative examples from Responsive, but many SRM platforms have something similar, so you can explore what's available in whatever tool you're using. We have something called the Content Library Dashboard, and this is going to give a high-level overview of the content library and its utilization. So you can say there's a content utilization report here. It also will show things like popular tags or something called collections, which is an organization system in Responsive. And this is going to help you understand what's popular, what's working, and what might need improvement. Maybe you don't have a lot of reviews cycles set up. Maybe things are super outdated. So this is going to be great for giving you that high level overview. The next tool that we have is something called the Content Library Usage Report, and it shows how projects are engaging with your library. And this will actually include how our AI tools at Responsive support that content retrieval and usage, so you can see if you're taking advantage, or like I mentioned, if it's a high amount of manual entries. And this can highlight where AI is being maximized or where it can be improved, and help you set those benchmarks for the future. The final report I want to highlight, and I don't know why, I just love this content library search terms report. Maybe it's because I personally know I'm sometimes spelling things wrong and typing things in really fast. So you can actually see in Responsive what your team is searching, whether that be in the library or in a project, or maybe in one of our extensions like a tool called Lookup. So this can help you understand how you can use AI to optimize your content discovery and make the library more responsive to your evolving needs. So even if you ask your team, oh, hey, are you able to find what you're looking for in the library? And they ignore you or say yes, you can go into that search report and kind of get a little peek for yourself. A little Big Brother, but it's okay. Marcia, do you want to talk about step 2?
I do. And I will say that content search terms report, I think the reason why I love it so much is because, unlike the other reports, you're not having to necessarily make up a story with the data you're seeing. You can see in real time why, like, sometimes you're like, okay, my team isn't spelling things right. That's the problem. Got it. Cool. It just gives you that perspective. So it's really nice.
Marcia, it's so funny. I feel like on all of our webinars, Marcia is usually my partner in crime on these. I feel like we always find a way to talk about the content search report. It's so random, but we really love it.
It doesn't get enough love. It doesn't get enough love. All right. Thanks for that, Helene. Step 2. So once you've gone through Helene's step of really getting to know your content library, you are one with your content library, you know it like it's your best friend, like the back of your hand. It's time to start thinking through that cleanup process. And that is first starting with identifying outdated content. Now, this is going to look different depending on your organizational structure. You're going to hear a common theme throughout this entire presentation. Every step we take, we need to start with some internal strategizing. So first and foremost, something to consider here is, have there been any major changes in the last several years that should be factored into how we're approaching this content? That could look like maybe a rebrand, like your company did a full rebrand a couple of years ago. And so anything from 2020 is no longer accurate. Let's get rid of it. It can look like getting rid of a product. It can look like, removing a business unit or anything of that nature. Those big changes are going to help you determine if some content can in bulk be removed. So it's outdated, so it's no longer in your library, and that outdated content is gone. We have a great quote from one of our favorite people in the world, Nicole here. She's a professional services consultant at Responsive. We have a whole team that does these audits all the time. They do content cleanups with our customers. She's one of them. She's fabulous. And she mentions that you shouldn't be afraid of getting rid of that rot content ahead of time, because you want to be spending the time actually analyzing and cleaning up content that's pertinent. So the more we can get rid of that unnecessary information that's no longer serving us, the less time we're going to be spending on the other editing that we'll need to do.
And so Marcia, do we want to identify what rot content is too? Because I feel like that's something that maybe is just be used at Responsive.
Yeah. Do you want to say what the acronyms for?
Redundant, outdated, and trivial content. We call it rot because it's rotten and we got to get rid of it.
Yeah, take the trash out. Thanks, Helene. Yep. So that's what we call rot. It can look different at your organization. It can look different in your platform, but it's really just the information that no longer makes sense and it's not serving a purpose, and it's cluttering up our content library, so our AI is getting inaccurate information. The next point here, which kind of feeds into what Nicole is saying, is, are we willing to let go of that content en masse? Can we get rid of a large chunk of content? At Responsive, we love Marie Kondo. If it's no longer serving us, let it go, right? We don't want to have anything that's not sparking joy. However, there are circumstances where you may want to reflect and look back on content. So if that's the case, if we're not willing to just trash a bunch of content, that's okay. We need to find a way to maybe keep it somewhere where it can be seen, but it's not necessarily getting accessed by our AI tool or whatever tools we're using in order to grab that information. And then finally, we'll want to discuss if we can break out the library in chunks, so we can kind of consider what time looks like in owner delegation. The more you're able to chunk out the library and maybe assign things, the better you're going to be to delegate. Obviously, that gives, different groups time to work on things, so you're not handling everything by yourself. But also, it can help you set those little goals along the way. So instead of saying, okay, by Friday, all of the rot content needs to be out of here, let's maybe chunk that out a little bit more so it's more attainable and you're not so overwhelmed with all of that work. So just something to consider in that phase. Now, this is the internal part. Part 2 of step 2 is going to be questions to ask your library. And we actually have some great reports in Responsive that may be available in your SRM platform. You may be able to access it if you're using Excels or folders, but we'll just show some examples from Responsive here. The first one's going to be obsolete content. Now, we identify obsolete content as content that hasn't been used or edited in X amount of years. And you can see at the top that we can chunk it out by, everything from up to 4 years or 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3 years, 3 to 4 years there. But this is saying that in the last 1 to 2 years, nobody has touched this content. It hasn't been looked at, it hasn't been used. Now, there could be some stories there. You could say, okay, well, maybe we put a bunch of content into our library because we launched this new product, but we haven't had to answer anything about it yet. Those are parts of the strategic conversation you need to have to determine what that time frame is going to look like. I'm going to venture to guess, however, if you have content sitting in 3 to 4 years that hasn't been used or edited, then maybe it's not working really well. And that's an easy way to go ahead and get rid of content ahead of time so you're not spending time editing it later. Again, this is a tool available in Responsive. However, you can check out if your SRM platform has something similar, or you can, however you're managing your content, there should be a way to narrow that search down. The second option, which is going to be applicable across the board for sure, is looking by project name. So in Responsive, if you save content from a project you're working on into the content library, or if you upload a project directly into the content library, it'll tag the project name on the content so you know exactly where it came from. I assume most SRM platforms are similar. And also, if you're working with a foldering system on your own computer, you likely have folders of different projects you've worked on, right? So this is something that's easier to manage a little bit. In this example, you can see that we did a search on Rise Up 2022. That's a project we worked on in 2022, so it's old. Rise Up is a program we offered a long time ago. Since then, we have revamped it. We've made it so much better. And so anything about Rise Up 22 that exists in our content library is no longer relevant. We've given it a glow up. So we can go ahead and take the project that we worked on for Rise Up 2022 way back then. We can do a bulk removal and we don't have to look at it anymore. That could be, again, something that you want to reference later. That'll be in our archive option that we'll talk about in a little bit. But overall, if it's not important and it doesn't matter to us anymore, it's not something we're working on, let's take it out of here. The final way is going to be with keyword search, which sounds so simple, but it's so effective and it has saved customers a lot of time on their content cleanup efforts. So if you, again, same idea with the product, if there's a product name that no longer exists for you and you're able to do a quick keyword search, you can get rid of it. In this example, I did a little string search. You can see my uppercase and. I looked up our answer library, which again, we love to put our product through glow ups. We now call it a content library, and the content library is way more efficient. So anything that we have in our content library about the answer library no longer has accurate information about how to do tasks. All of this is very task oriented. So I can feel confident looking up anything that's talking about the answer library and removing it because that no longer has anything to do with what our product looks like. So anything from keyword search to project name to obsolete content, those are great ways to get started on that obsolete process and great ways to start thinking through how to remove your library in chunks.
Awesome. So you've identified the content, as Marcia pointed out, and now you have to actually clean it up, which weirdly can feel like the most daunting part. I strangely know this firsthand. My dad's a bit of a pack rat. He has my homework saved from when I was in 5th grade, math problems. And I've identified to him that this is no longer needed, but it still for some reason is in his garage. So this is the part where you put all this work in to identify, now you can clean it up. And there's just 3 simple ways that you can clean it up once you've identified it. And that is first archiving versus trash. You'll need to decide whether you're going to archive that content or you're going to trash it. So Marcia's mentioned it, but archiving, at least in the responsive tool, is going to allow your content to be stored within the platform, but it won't be accessible in your workflows. So this is going to be really useful if you need to store historical content, or maybe you want to restore it later. You're just not at the time that you have time to work on it, but you just don't want it to be a part of your day-to-day processes. So that would be my first recommendation to consider. The second one is trashing your content, and that's going to completely remove the content from your system. Now in Responsive, we have a backup plan that we have trash that you can decide to delete between 30 and 90 days. It's a setting you can set up, so you can always recover it if you made a little bit of a boo-boo. But the key here is to know if you have the authority to fully remove content, or if retaining some historical context could be important for compliance or reference. Now, again, this is going to depend on the tool that you're using, but we also have something at Responsive called Past Project Search that allows you to search your responses from content in a previous project, even if you never saved it in the content library. So I often suggest that to clients that kind of want historical data and they're hesitant to completely trash it. So that's an option as well, although you can always archive it too. So that's going to be the first part. The second part is duplicate content. Again, in Responsive, we have something called a duplicate report that I would recommend to use. But duplicates just in general end up happening. I feel like it even happens within Google Drive or whatever you're using, but it's probably because many people think that more content is better, just like Marcia was referencing with AI. But honestly, duplicates can really create confusion for AI. If there's multiple versions of similar content, AI may pull from both of those, leading to less accurate results. Even outdated information within these duplicates can affect the quality of the answers generated by your AI tool. One way, again, to streamline that is just using that duplicate report. And that's going to quickly identify that duplicate content and make your cleanup really efficient and easy. So you can set a timer for, hey, 15 minutes. I'm going to run through the duplicate report and try to clean up as much as possible before you do any sort of manual cleanup. And on that note of manual cleanup, I always say this for responsive, and hopefully it's true if you're using another tool. Basically, anything you can do individually, you can do in bulk. And we call it bulk actions. So before you take an individual step, see if there's a way that you can do it via bulk content update. This could be something like updating terminology, product names, or any outdated information. It's a great way to ensure your content stays relevant without adding extra work. So you can bulk assign reviewers, you can bulk assign the new tag that you created, you can bulk change like using search terms, changing your name. I referenced it kind of at the beginning, but we used to be called RFPIO. So making sure that content says responsive now is going to be really important. So this is like, the meat and potatoes. You got to clean up the content to be able to get AI to work the best. Marcia, do you want to talk about organizing it after you clean it up?
Yeah, it's, you give yourself a pat on the back, you've organized your content, it's good to go, or you've cleaned up your content, excuse me, it's good to go. You're like, that was the worst thing ever. And then you have to organize. So we've cleaned up Helene's dad's garage, but now we have to put it in boxes. It's no one's favorite thing. And if it is your favorite thing, very happy for you. But now we've moved on to step 4 here. So Monica here has a great quote. She says, organized content is important because users can trust the quality of content and can use it with confidence. And that is so spot on, so true. At the end of the day, organizing content is more about making your team members feel comfortable with finding content than anything. Otherwise, if you are sending them into a void and asking them to do a keyword search, the same thing works for AI, honestly, then they're going to yield results that may not be relevant. And if it takes them more than 5 seconds is exaggerated, but if it takes them too long to find the information that they need, they're going to throw their hands up, get frustrated, and not want to use the content, which again goes against the machine learning needed for AI. It goes against making sure that things are relevant. We don't know if people aren't using it, right? So having organized content is super important. So we're going to go back to the team. We've, cleaned up our content. We got to go back to the drawing board, start strategizing again. And we need to think through what is going to be the most effective way to organize the content for searchers. And depending on your platform, this can look a couple of different ways. If you're not using a platform, it can look like a foldering system in Google Drive or on your desktop or in a shared drive, and so forth. In responsive, we have a couple of different tools that you can use. Tags is going to be the simplest way to do it. You can think of it like, if I have this question that's asking about a specific product, I can give it a tag and say it's tag product name and then have a tag for security because it's a security question about this specific product. So it's really just there to serve as when I go into the library, I can look for those tags and then I get to this answer without doing a keyword search yet. We also have, I'm going to butcher how to say this, hierarchical tags. We call them H tags. That has been newly released this past year. That gives more of a foldering system to your tags. So you're able to do parent and child versions of it. So in that scenario, we could say, I have a product tag, and then under my product tag, I have a security and a legal and a general tag that feeds up to that. So you're able to provide more structure there. We also have what's called collections. This is going to be another filtering mechanism, can work in the same way. However, the added benefit of a collection is that you are able to restrict who has access to content with it. So if, for instance, you have information that only the security team should be able to see, you can create a collection, call it security, and they will be the only ones to have access to that collection. That can also work to silo out content for your users, not necessarily for security reasons, but if you're wanting to create a tailored version of the content library for them, you can say, okay, when you log in, this is what you see, this is what you see. So they're not necessarily having to go through the steps of filtering. The last item we have for filtering in responsive is custom fields, and this is another filtering mechanism. It can also work for reporting purposes. So if you're wanting to capture any data on your Q&A pairs or your documents, you can have a custom field for it and report on it later. Now, with all of these different tools, your head might be spinning. How do I know what to choose? That'll again tie back to what is going to be the most effective way for your users and for your AI tool. So a big question that's been asked as we've launched our new products recently is, how do I tell my AI tool to only look at legally verified information? The answer is simple. You can't necessarily say, hey, only look at my legally verified information. You can't just type that into them, but you can have a collection and say, only look in this collection when you're searching through my content. So you can direct it in that way to make sure that it's grabbing the accurate information there, which again, the whole point of this is to reduce security, restrict, or any issues, right? So you can make sure that it's looking in the right space. Same thing for your end users. You want them to be able to go into your content library and be able to find it as seamlessly as possible without having to jump through a bunch of hoops. So as a rule of thumb, we do want to limit the number of tags we're using or whatever structure we're using. So that way it's simple enough. It should be making their lives easier. It should be making your life easier. You don't want to overcomplicate it. Now, how have other customers structured their libraries? That's the big question, right? It's not one size fits all, unfortunately. A practice I've done with a lot of my customers that I think has been really helpful is taking the library outside of your computer, if you can, maybe a different platform or a different software works too, but taking it and doing more of a sticky note structure, writing everything down on a note, and then kind of looking at it visually has really helped a lot of my customers figure out what method's going to work better for them, because you can, pick up the sticky note and move it. You can color code. Visualizing it does tend to make it a lot easier. There are some softwares you can use. I think, to be honest, Google Slides is what my customers usually use for that, but that's been super helpful. And when we've talked about some examples that have worked for customers, it depends on how they're using their content. So one way can be, okay, we work on a lot of security questionnaires, we work on a lot of DDQs, and we also have some narrative proposals, and those all should not be interacting with each other in the library. So that's how they've set up their library. They've said, this is my content for security, this is my content for DDQ, this is my content for narrative. They've tagged in that way, and then they've set up a structure that matches what those documents tend to look like by section name and so forth within that. So that can be one way that you approach it. That makes it a little bit easier from a project perspective. If you're using an AI tool pretty plainly, not necessarily based on the types of projects you're using, then it might be impactful for you to create an organization structure that better matches just how your organization works and how your teams work. So it really depends on what's going on in your own organization and how you're using the content for how you should structure it. At Responsive, I will always brag about our customers. We have, I don't want to say the best customers, because I'm sure there are other great customers, but ours are pretty wonderful. We have a community available where lots of customers have gone in and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this. What are your thoughts? And our customers will collaborate together on some best practices that have worked for them based on, what business type they're in or how they're using their content library. So if you are a Responsive user and you're on here and you're like, I didn't know about that, please join our community. If not, if you're using another SRM platform, I'd encourage you to see if there's another type of community for you to join so you can engage in those conversations as well. Or if you are, on your own, you're working in Google Drive, that's okay too. There's likely some place on LinkedIn or some kind of community you can connect with to figure out how people are organizing their content. And even if it's someone who's using an SRM, you can take those principles and apply them yourself. So we encourage you to reach out to phone a friend or do what you need to get that organization structure set up.
And I think I speak for both Marcia and I. We're on LinkedIn. So if you want to shoot us a message and ask us a question, feel free, even if you're not a Responsive customer. We are nerds about this. You can probably imagine we're pretty fun at a dinner party because we can talk about content organization for days. But Marcia, you think I'm good to talk about the final step?
Yeah, take us home, Helene.
Awesome. So you've cleaned and organized your content. You'll want to set it up for long-term success. So how do you ensure that it's relevant and accurate over time? That's going to be the easiest ways to establish content owners and review cadence alongside that. I know it's probably actually the hardest part is to get your team to then help you with the information that they're the experts in. But having like that regular review cycle, especially in the AI, is really going to make it easier for them over time because the AI tool in the future will be able to work better. So I have some examples of best practices generally for your organization that can kind of help. That way you're not assigning your team an overload of reviews on something that, is kind of basic and can be reviewed every 24 months, for example. But it's really going to depend on the type of content you have. Some might need more frequent attention and some reviewed less often. So a well-planned schedule helps to maintain the integrity and the usefulness of your content and those review cycles. I love this tip actually from one of our great onboarding consultants, Kristen, where she recommends staggering your review dates to prevent your SMEs from becoming overwhelmed with too many updates at once. That's if you saw that content library we call it the insights report too. That's what's in my head. But that overview report can help you see if you have reviewers that are super backlogged and have a lot of reviews. In responsive, you can also assign teams to review content, which can be a way to, kind of disperse content a little bit more evenly across a team, although it could end up that one person on that team is always answering. So that's something to consider too. But another way to think about it is telling your SMEs like what's in it for them, encouraging them to review. And it's truly that regular reviews is going to ensure that that AI tool, whatever you're using, is working with up-to-date content, which is going to improve search accuracy and the quality of the suggestions. And by reviewing that content, it's going to help enhance the AI workflows, make it easier for the whole team to access relevant, timely content and save time in the process, and hopefully reduce them from having to do reviews last minute or in emergency informations or having any compliance concerns down the line. So it's really going to help drive efficiency and improve the workload for your team. So we can talk about finally like some tips and tricks to consider just to wrap up what we've talked about. The first thing we've said it is to get organized. We really recommend a project plan and define clear goals. If you break that cleanup into manageable phases and link to specific objectives, you can easily assign deliverables to owners and set due dates to keep everyone on track. And this is really going to set you apart in this AI era, is if you show your leadership and your organization and how you can collaborate with AI and not against it. So that's really important. Along with that, as Marcia mentioned at the top, is getting buy-in from leadership. Communication is so clear here. And by setting that, goals and expectations, you can show them after how your leadership and your cleanup process has changed the way that your entire organization access information, whether that improves your win rates, improves the way that you're using AI, allows more time for your team to focus on other more strategic and creative aspects. That is all going to be really important. And I would say, don't forget to launch training sessions for your team. And reminders to keep the team focused. We all have our own priorities. We have our own personal lives that we're focused on, and it can sometimes take time to adjust to a new process. Consider if your organization has any type of webinars like Responsive has for training your users. We have a lot of customization in the Academy. Like we have decks that you can use to train your team, and we have those training webinars, as I mentioned. So I would explore that as well. But truly, AI should support your work, not compete with it. It's going to hopefully free up those automated tasks for you so you can focus on more creative endeavors, even if it's like making fun GIFs to communicate with your team or whatever you're good at and creative at. That way AI can handle the heavy lifting and you can be more strategic over time in your career. So really, staying organized, getting buying, and leveraging AI effectively will ensure your content library is running smoothly and your team's priorities are met. But with that, I think we're really good on time, Marcia.